Well, since Henrik is with us this week and is this week's Brody, Henrik, would you like to kick us off with the recorded, the whole thing that Edward does?
Yeah, I'm playing Edward, right?
Yes, you are. Just on TV.
Yeah, recorded the 9th European time.
Yes.
September 2024. 2024. Yeah.
It is 2024.
Nailed
Welcome,
it.
Henrik. Welcome,
Yep.
Brody. Welcome, Ray. Oh, my goodness. This is a super exciting episode. We have with us a very super famous guest, I guess, someone that everybody would recognize almost immediately. So we have a lot of stuff to cover as we go along. However, I did want to kind of start out. I will actually end before we bring our visitor on screen. So let's jump around and see what you all have been up to. Brody, how's the father? How's fatherhood?
It's great. She's adorable. Just adorable. It breaks my heart every time she giggles. She's giggling. Giggling is the best.
Oh,
Get her to giggle.
Baby giggles are amazing.
Yeah. It's great. And sometimes it's fun. Actually, everybody at Microsoft and customers are really understanding when I'm like, yeah, I can't go on camera and I'm kind of in the living room, solo parenting, feeding a baby. So if you hear anything in the background, sorry. Everyone's pretty understanding. So it's been good. It's a great place to work and support your family. So everything's great. Can't complain. I mean, she sleeps through the night, pretty much jackpot. Loving it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't. We were talking about that before the show. I think you need a couple more kids to actually get the baby experience, because babies can be a little bit more difficult. Maybe we have to wait till it's that toddler phase for you. I don't know.
I'm sure I'll pay the price at one point, Rod.
Yeah, definitely have to pay the price in some respect. Hopefully, because the rest of us did it. So I'm just kidding. I hope you're the best, Brody.
Thanks, buddy.
I really do.
Ominous.
Yeah, right.
Get ready
after
for pain.
Brody. Edward is not here with us this week, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Something that reminded me of here in just a second. But Henrik, everyone, those that have been watching this show for any length of time should remember Henrik. Henrik is with us this week. We have referred to him as the other Brody several times when Brody couldn't make it and Henrik filled the gap. This week, Edward is not here. So Henrik is this week's Edward. Just a reason why Henrik is actually on the show, and we want to give him a huge Microsoft thank you. He is part of our CCP at Microsoft, and he does some amazing stuff. He's really hardworking in that program. If you're part of that program or you're familiar with it, you know how that works. Based on your activity and your engagement, you get, I think it's points or some sort. But anyway, ultimately, there's a reward. And for whatever reason, Henrik always chooses to be a guest on this or a guest host on this show as part of his reward. I think one of these days he will second guess his choices. But Henrik, what have you been up to this week?
Yeah, so thanks for having me again on the show, Rod, Brody, Ray. Yeah, as I mentioned before, it's the life of an IT guy, right? It goes from looking at Fabric to implementing a new dynamic CRM system to protect the third-party SaaS applications. It's been really hectic this week. Well, last week and Monday today for me, since the work Monday is over. Yeah, it's the life of an IT guy.
So last time I talked to you is when we had lunch actually in Denmark together. Remember that? I forget the name of that place. Yeah, that's the last time we talked. And we sat there and you received a call and they told you that Microsoft Sentinel was yours at your organization. Is Microsoft Sentinel, are you still responsible for that?
It still is. Well, semi-mine.
Yeah.
No pressure.
So that's a big responsibility. And then I hear you've just done all this other stuff this week, right? Already. And I'm thinking, why do you not work at Microsoft? Because we could use you. I'm just kidding. This is not an interview.
Yeah, I'll check my mail in just a moment.
Well, I think that's the top reward for the CCP is automatic. Yeah, I'm just kidding. I'll get in trouble for that one.
Entertainment purposes only, Rod. We're gonna
Right. Well, it's like you get a star. The star is like the silent thank you for things. All you have to do is like something on somebody's post or put a star on it, and it's a thank you. But people love that stuff. It really costs you nothing to do that, but people, really get something from it. So.
Yeah. I don't get bored. I got lots of work to do. So,
Well, apparently you don't, because you're actually really active in the CCP. So I appreciate it.
but isn't that also work?
It is. It is.
It is. Yeah.
Testing new features.
Shaping the roadmap. Rod, come on. What are we getting sassy now?
I know. I'm too sassy sometimes.
Yeah.
Ray, what have you been up to this week so far, or latter part of next week? I don't care.
For the future. Let's see. My 5-year-old has been driving me cuckoo birds, but that is the best. So I took the week off to get her acclimated to school. So it's her first time, in between the two households, and loving mommy, loving daddy. She's amazing, but my brain has not atrophied because I'm still like plugged into work, right? But just like not like hands-on throughout the entire day. And I also have my class, external attack surface management. So got a lab to complete, got some OSINT to do. So doing some stuff, ready to gear up for next week so I can go all in and plan for Ignite. So, more to come. We'll say that.
Speaking of Ignite, I guess maybe we could start there, right? I want to finish off before we bring our super special guest on screen and we start having that discussion. Two things. I want to throw out a couple teasers to our audience. Number one, this may be the first time it's announced publicly. I probably shouldn't say anything about it. However, registration for Ignite opens this week.
Microsoft Ignite,
which is in Chicago this year in November. Let me give you a little insight into that. Some things I'm really super excited about. Number one, of course, I'll be talking about Copilot for Security while I'm there, and some sessions and some theater things and
heard of it,
booth duty and all that good kind of stuff. However, both Ray and Brody, in addition to myself, we will be at Ignite this year together, and we will be doing, maybe officially, the Microsoft Security Insight show from Microsoft Ignite this year. We will be we'll be doing it from Ignite no matter what, but it may actually be kind of an official thing. So that would actually
we got to find a hallway with some power plugs. We're doing it, right? It's happening. Yeah.
I'm sure we can find a boardroom somewhere.
Breakout room next to a fern.
No paparazzi. Grazie.
Yeah.
Ignite is in Chicago this year. I don't know those that are familiar or fans of Microsoft conferences. The very first Ignite pre-COVID was in Chicago at McCormick Place, just like this year. And this year, we're kind of considering this almost the Ignite reset, right? So we're not going to have 30,000 people there, but this year, as we have continued to do for the past several years, we are increasing the attendance and the audience numbers. So we are going to eventually, hopefully, get back to those pre-COVID audience numbers. So will be still limited this year a little bit. So when that registration opens up, you definitely want to register quickly. Okay, I'll leave it there. The other thing is, I mentioned Henrik is from Denmark. Edward is in Denmark. I will be back in Denmark in March of next year, either the first or second week. It's not been completely 100% set in stone yet, but I want to mention this, not because I just want everybody to come see me, but there's actually something really cool going to be happening at Experts Live next year that I have the distinct opportunity to be part of. And I'm just going to tell you, if you're within a cab ride or a bus ride or a train ride or a short flight, you're going to want to be at Experts Live in March of next year. Just kind of keep your finger on that mouse button, add like a dummy calendar invite to yourself, just so you don't forget about Experts Live next year, because I'm telling you, you're not going to want to miss what happens there next year. And that's as far as I can go about it. I can't talk about it anymore. If I did, I would probably upset the people that are supposed to announce these things. So I already kind of screwed up with the Ignite registration this week, but I'm okay with that because
Rod's
I can-
such a big shot. He's
I
almost
can
too
do it.
good for the podcast now. He can't reveal everything. He can't quite tell us everything. International
do it.
superstar.
Can't
I
do it.
mean,
Man
yeah,
of mystery, really.
You're not
Man of
gonna.
mystery.
There's nothing you can do to pull it out of me. Sorry, not gonna work.
we're not trying for the record, but yes, thank you for letting us know that you can't talk about something. Yeah.
Last thing, I just want people to know about it because we'll see. The last thing I do want to talk
Mark
about.
probably knows. Mark will give a back channel. He's like, don't worry about it.
Mark
Yeah,
knows.
he's laughing.
Mark knows. I already told him. The last thing is just before the show, I noticed, I mentioned this to Henrik already, because he has all the Star Wars stuff in the back. He's also a Star Trek fan, by the way, Ray. But he has all the
Fans
Star
of
Wars
both.
stuff.
That's allowed.
James Earl Jones, Darth Vader, just passed away at 93. That's sad. Super sad.
He was the chosen
So,
one.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about, I remember him as the original Darth Vader voice. Also, he was the bad guy in the original Conan the Barbarian with Arnold Schwarzenegger, if you remember that. That voice is so super distinctive. I don't care what it was. If you walked by a TV or a movie screen and he was on camera, you would always know it was him. You wouldn't even have to look. Just that voice was super amazing. So,
Yeah. Especially if he was
Always.
like choking you with his hand from 30 feet away. Like you would just know immediately it's Darth Vader.
Yeah. He's altered the agreement. Pray he alters it. No further.
You see,
I
I
don't-
laughed at, yeah, no one caught my reference earlier. Thank you, Ray, for making a quote. That's relatable and laughable. Yeah.
I don't know what to say to that.
Thanks, Rod.
So
Anything else?
I think we're where we need to be, right?
Right.
Existentially, is that?
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. We have a super awesome guest on this evening. I think people have been anticipating this, and I think we should bring him on camera. And even Andrew already knows, hey, nice to have Mark on the show. Even before Mark was invited to the screen. Mark, welcome. Mark Simos is here, everyone.
Howdy, howdy.
Yeah,
How are
sure.
you? Mark, I've known you for a while, known your work, and I think everybody has actually known your work. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Microsoft Security Insights Show. Pleased to have you here, and I know we're going to have some awesome discussions. Would you go ahead and introduce yourself? I don't actually really know what your role title is these days. I think
Yeah. Yeah, I can't wait to hear this actually. What is his
Yeah.
actual title? Yeah. Yeah.
So, for those that don't know, at Microsoft, like your global address list, sort of like official title changes all the time, and it doesn't always match your job. And I just gave up on that. I've been at Microsoft like 24 years. I think I gave up on it like probably 15 to 20 years ago. And I just started about 8-10 years ago. I call myself lead cybersecurity architect and call it a day. It's just easier that way, and it describes what I do, and it leads to less questions and pointless conversations.
Well, and then at the same time, when you go into a room with a customer and there's like a couple of you on the same level, you're always the lead cybersecurity architect. They have to give way. They're like, I'll just let Mark go first.
Yeah, Mark's got to go. He goes up the
Yeah.
chain. Actually, that if you don't mind, I was going to get to fun questions later, but that's a good segue. Mark, if you don't mind, I want to know, when does Mark Simos have to join a customer call? What kind of
Ooh.
escalation does it take
Threshold.
to bring in Mark Simos? You know, like, can you give us some like war stories? No customer names, of course, right?
All right, I'll blend this in with my sort of James Earl Jones like favorite quote. I'm thinking of the one from Hunt for Red October, where he walks up to Little Key and says, "That torpedo hit the hull, and I was never here." Yeah, playing the CIA guy, which I thought was just an awesome line. It's not that serious. Yeah, I mean, for the most part, when I first started doing the cybersecurity thing, and we were a smaller sort of kind of an all-in-wonder organization that did pre-sales, post-sales, helping customers through that whole process. I ended up being on a lot more customer calls and a lot more escalations and whatnot. Generally, like technical escalations was sort of where I've been in cyber, kind of the top of the food chain from a technical perspective, unless it went deep into like a product roadmap kind of thing. But just generally, how should it work? Like that's been my thing. I used to have to do a lot more of those in the past, but as we have a robust chief security officer sort of front line that does a lot of that stuff in the pre-sales engagements of, hey, what's Microsoft's thing on this? And tell me about SFI, Secure Future Initiative, and all that kind of stuff. I haven't had to do that for a while. On the CSU side, it's a little bit different because we have the customer success unit. I don't even know if that's the official name of the organization, but everybody knows it as CSU. But on that sort of post-sale customer success side of the world, I'm doing a little bit more in terms of, because I build and maintain the security adoption framework, and I'm in the process of getting that something that the field can do at scale and a lot more people can deliver. On how to do SOC right, how to do identity access right, how to do infrastructure and development security, et cetera. And so I'm doing a lot of like shadow, reverse shadow type of things with our field folks. A lot of folks in our Corp/HQ folks that then help our field out. So I'm sort of building my front line there on that piece and doing a lot of that kind of thing. So that's generally where it comes in. Every once in a while, there's a, hey, here's a special case that does pull me in. But those are gotten rarer and rarer as we have, our field has grown, and also the skills of our field have grown significantly in cyber. We have a lot of smart security people now.
Excellent. Glad to hear you're not just the default escalation point, because you are the lead cybersecurity.
There was a time.
Yeah,
I have felt that pain. Yes.
I was wondering, basically, did we have to bring Mark in after Midnight Blizzard? Pre Secure Future Initiative. Like, did Mark Simos have to help calm some situations down?
I was at the ready, but we have, like I said, a really, really strong set of folks that have been in the CISO chair. They understand it. They've gone through my work. They've gone through other things. I mean, they've been briefed by the folks that are actually, doing that kind of work internally. So we have a much better scaled machine than we started out as. I mean, you got to realize that when I talk about the past goes all the way back to we had a small consulting group of I think 10 people that grew to 20. Was our, sort of reboot of our customer facing cyber stuff back in, 9, 10, 11, sometime in that time frame. When I think back, I think way back. But yeah, that's, we've gotten so much stronger at that, and we have so many good people, right? It's been fantastic to learn from them, work with them over the years, learn from them, and, teach what I've learned too.
Well, and I think that's probably kind of the important thing to highlight about you, Mark, but I think also about Microsoft. I think we can all kind of look back at a time or a date or an era within Microsoft where, we were concerned about security, but there was a point where we got serious about security, right? Not just as an industry, but even ourselves, because obviously security kind of has to have this thread throughout everything that we do. But you at Microsoft, you talked about 2011, 12, 13, when all of that happened. But I think you would give us a great perspective of that seriousness of Microsoft and how that has kind of evolved you into kind of this lead architect role and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll take it all the way back, or at least as far back as I can go. And just for the record, I was hired at Microsoft, and my start date was the Monday after the huge launch party for Windows, SQL, Office, everything 2000. So literally, the topic of conversation that Monday was how cool the party was the Friday before I got hired. So how far back I go.
The appetizers,
it was
out of this
some
world.
Popular band from the 60s that was playing at the Charlotte site, and I'm like,
was there any cake left?
I didn't even know to look. I was a new dude. I mean, it was my first day.
3-day-old cake in the fridge. Mark's just like, oh, is there any more?
Well, hey,
Whose birthday was this?
But the one thing that I've seen, and this is mostly direct experience, but also through some of the folks that were around before even then, because Michael Howard and Steve Lipner and all that were doing some great work even before that. What I saw is that there was kind of a parallel evolution thing going on, where a long time ago was sort of the Orange Book type of, and that's just a reference to the old NSA, how to do things right in security or whatever. I think there's a whole bunch of colored books. I don't have them memorized. Some geeks do. I don't. I didn't live through that era, but there was this idea that security was a configuration, right? Or a feature, right? And that you just had to have access control lists and this and that and the other. And therefore that was security, right? And the thing that we learned in front of the whole world, when Nimda, Blaster, Slammer, and Melissa, and I Love You, and all that kind of stuff was hitting, God, that's bringing back memories. Sorry. Was that security was more than a configuration. It was also the code itself, right? And security had to include that. And so we added a second pillar to what security was. And Microsoft very much led the industry, for obvious reasons. We had to. We were a large portion of the software market at that point in time. I mean, platform-wise, for sure. There's a whole lot of stuff built on our platform and ecosystem, but it was, very much dominated by Microsoft. And so we were like the first folks to get hit with that and hit hard. And the funny thing is nobody's gone back and said, hey, Microsoft, remember when I used to yell at you and swear at you and tell you sucked, back 20 years ago? Well, I have to patch my iPhone now, and I'm sorry. No, they never did that. They just kept going and telling us for other things. But we learned that lesson, right? We took our hits, and we earned the hits, but we also earned the leadership space where we figured out how to do a security development lifecycle. We scaled it. We shared those lessons learned. They became, or influenced, I can't remember exactly the right word, an ISO standard, right? And so, we did the right thing there. And so the industry kind of evolved. And then there was sort of this third one that was interesting that came along. I kind of blend two things in my head. Maybe I shouldn't. But I feel like the third pillar was that security is not just the code itself and how you configure it. It's also how you operate it. So not just the functional things that could go wrong, not just the configuration things of whoever deployed it or whether the configuration drift, but also how you actually operate in real time. And that really kind of lit up in two different types of or trends and events. One was when Pass the Hash was not just weaponized, because it was weaponized by very advanced groups for a while quietly. But when it came out through, okay, let me get the timing right. Hernando Ochoa built, I think it was a Pass the Hash toolkit followed by Windows Credential Editor, which kind of opened the aperture, and it became a easily, freely downloadable tool that anyone could use, right? Just a command line Windows kind of thing. And it was reliable. All of a sudden, the lateral traversal thing, which broke Lockheed Martin, kill chain, and everything like that, it exposed us all to the fact, whether we realized it or not at the time, that, hey, operational matters, right? And that's a pillar of security. And then the cloud thing also sort of brought it into focus because we had to define a shared responsibility model, this, that, and the other, and you had to run the thing well. And organizations, if they did it right with SaaS and PaaS, they were shrinking their responsibility footprint, trusting their cloud provider to do it, and verifying, hopefully. But then the little sliver that they had left, depending on how much you have IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, part of that included operating it well. And so I think between the two of those, that's where I saw the industry evolve to that. And sort of Microsoft in many ways ended up, again, having to lead by virtue of having a significant cloud business. And so that's kind of how I saw it evolved in big picture. I mean, is that kind of like what you're thinking of?
Yeah, a little bit. And I was kind of trying to lead to, I think one of the things I think you're at least initially most notable for most recently was kind of that cybersecurity reference architecture, right? The really nice slide that kind of covers everything. I know you're working on some other things now, but where is that today? Is it still in use? Is it evolved somewhat?
Yes. It actually gets, I think whenever there's like a release month or whatever, I think our stats are somewhere around like 20,000 unique visitors hit that site. I don't know how many of them download it, but they go to there and they read it and all that. And so that's on a big month. And I've seen it, I think it goes down to like 8,000 unique visitors a month on a sort of average month. So, still very, very popular. People are using it a lot, and I love to see that. And I love to hear the stories of how people are using it. Honestly, I don't get that much.
Maybe we should explain what it is. Maybe we should explain what it is.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So this is the Microsoft Cybersecurity Reference Architectures, or MCRA for short. And it's probably one of the most complicated slides that people actually like.
It's great. It builds out just wonderfully.
Thank you. It's got most of the Microsoft, the original one, the capability slide, has most of the Microsoft cybersecurity capabilities on it. And it's got like little descriptions, little hover text, and all that kind of stuff, and a link to the documentation site so you can understand what the heck each of those different things are. And it's grown, right? It started out as one slide. Thank you. Perfect. Actually, that's the interactive guide. So I think you have to go up a little bit further there.
Oh, I was on your list page.
The marks list. Yeah. I think MCRA is somewhere in there. I don't remember where it is off the top of my head.
Keep talking, I'll find it.
But there's the MCRA right there. So effectively, it started out as one diagram, which, was kind of like, what the heck does Microsoft have in cybersecurity? It was kind of the question it answered, and it's, learned to answer other questions since. But then over time, it's grown, and people are, and we need to answer, okay, how does this apply to the SOC? How does this apply to identity and access? How does this apply to infrastructure? And so it's sort of grown into like a series of diagrams. And that was sort of the second generation. And then the third generation, which we're on now, is we realized the reference architecture is all fine and good, but if you don't actually have an overall strategy and you don't actually have the other components of it, then it's not quite enough. So we integrated it into something that we call the Security Adoption Framework, or SAF, and so that's a series of workshops that the folks in our unified folks deliver to help our customers plan and map their strategies and do all that kind of stuff. Everything from CISO strategy all the way down to technical implementation. So it's sort of grown to become like a central component, kind of the crown jewel of that security adoption framework.
Right. I noticed too when I clicked on that. So there was the MCRA, but it looks like you're working on some other things as well that are kind of related to that, right?
Yep.
Maybe some AI stuff, maybe NIST stuff. Before we get into that, though, I'm actually, I'll switch over to Brody here in a second. Eventually, I want to talk about this whole anti-pattern thing, because that to me is super interesting. I think of anti-patterns in one way, but also kind of think of cyber drift almost in the same manner, right? Where kind of things change and aren't monitored over time. But anyway, Brody has a question. Sorry.
More of a thank you. I know we said at the beginning of the podcast, you may know Mark based on his work, and I leverage Mark's work all the time as a consultant and cherry pick slides, and my CBI bonus is probably partly thanks to you, Mark. So I just want to say thanks. And as long as I get approved to go to Ignite, I can shake your hand in person. So I really appreciate it. I'm on my 4th year, and having access to that and showcasing it to customers and making them aware that it exists in the first place to explain these concepts and seeing it evolve over the years, it's just fantastic. I don't know if there's going to be a limit, if it's going to be a 5,000 page document in 25 years or something, but you're doing a great job keeping it up. Just Microsoft loves its PowerPoint decks, and this is one of the better ones I've seen.
Well, you could turn that into an AI source, and you wouldn't use a Copilot to access it. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, it's funny. The Zero Trust Playbook thing in the background, the AI thing was exploding just as we were getting ready to finish it up, and so we had to very quickly put together an AI chapter that explained the dynamics and the physics of it. And as I was going through it, I was like, we should probably also modify the copyright statement to explicitly disallow people from making their own copilots based on it. And so I ended up kind of like working with the publisher's lawyers on that one. So it's probably one of the first books to actually have a no, you cannot use this to train your model statement.
So we went just the opposite. I'll just share this little anecdote with the KQL book from Microsoft Press we just released. Mm-hmm. There's actually a Copilot for Security plugin that you can access.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah, it's probably the first book with AI integration. But anyway.
Not a big deal. There's Rod again, just Rockstar.
It's a plug for a plugin, you just see it. It's
just another first.
But yeah, so you are working on sort of a cybersecurity architecture for the AI stuff, and maybe was it red teaming as well, or just generally the architecture?
It's more on just kind of guiding people's thinking on the AI front. I mean, I can run you through it if you want me to kind of share screen and show you the slides. Yeah.
Yep.
So let me bring this puppy up, and this is in the downloadable version of the MCRA slides, so you can, so y'all can.
While you're pulling that up, for those listening in, come back, look at the show page, or watch the video, because we will actually apply or provide the show notes, these links and stuff. Mark has, of course, the aka.ms/Mark's list. That's where I find everything. It's a LinkedIn page, but there's all kinds of other short links and stuff too. So here we go.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I'll just give a quick tour of the MCRA while we're here. So, this is effectively now kind of a narrative thing, not just a bunch of diagrams. And so the way we kind of approach this is, making the case for end-to-end security. So anti-patterns, I know, was mentioned earlier. So these are the ones at the architectural level that people get wrong a lot. And then we kind of walk through, okay, what is success of security? It's, stopping it left of bang and also dealing with the things that do happen right of bang on through it. Had a little fun with Age of Empires. And kind of explaining how, one of the key anti-patterns of people thinking that the attackers are going to try and bust their head against the firewall when in fact they're just going to send an email asking for your password.
Perfect. I love Age of Empires. I'm so happy you did that. I had a big geek moment when I saw that. Perfect.
Awesome. Clarified some zero assumed trust is really what it is all about. And we're having to burn down these false assumptions of trust that built up over 30 years when people didn't know what security was really going to become. And then, kind of some imperatives, like you've got to look at the whole picture end to end. You can't just look at the network side or the identity side or, any particular slice of it. You have to look at the whole ugly picture and then ruthlessly prioritize and just get started. Don't get overwhelmed. Don't get into a panic trap, but just get started. And then the diagrams, which we saw this visual earlier. And then the AI stuff is there next to the people. Which not everybody will necessarily agree with, but that's where we categorized it.
Mark, when you hear folks say that people are the weakest link in security, what's your take on that?
I pretty much say that you're thinking about it exactly wrong. People, your greatest potential and your asset. And I'll give you all a sneak peek at one of my new favorite slides that I'm not sure where it's going to live. But it is it's one of those I'm going to fit into one of my upcoming presentations.
Shown here first, by the way.
Yes.
Grand reveal.
I'm kind of doing a sports analogy because I'm getting tired of the war analogies. And essentially, security is a team sport. We're not playing it very well because we put the security team on the field, say you're the goalie, and anything that gets through is your fault.
Yeah.
And then you face the full brunt of all the attackers while business, IT, and everybody else sit on the sideline talking to each other, talking about other stuff. And there's this guy over to the right that we're not quite sure what he's doing, honestly. But that's like the problem we have in security is like, nobody else knows that security is part of their job. In fact, that's one of the things I'm working on, like at the Open Group, is kind of working on some standards and, adopting them fairly rapidly into the Microsoft guidance we do, which is like, everybody's got to do security, right?
Yeah. So there's pushback recently. I've seen it on professional platforms where they're railing against the notion that security should be baked into everybody's job description or how they show up in the workplace. And really, the onus must be on the cyber practitioners. But maybe we need to think of it more critically, where it's like the primary responsibility of security is on the cybersecurity folks. And it's a shared responsibility where we must be vigilant, mindful, and aware, et cetera.
I actually think about it even a little bit different than that. The thing I've realized is security is a support function, right? Just like finance, just like HR, just like physical safety, just all of those things are support functions. The CEO doesn't blame the CFO if they spent too much money. The plant manager that didn't take the safety officer's recommendation to put a rail in shouldn't take the hit if the guy fell into the acid. The safety officer, it's not their fault. They made the recommendation to fix it. And then they said, no, we're going to accept that risk. Well, that's your decision, right? You can't make someone else accountable for your decision. And so like we aren't seeing security in the correct light. It's a support function. And so that's been one of the biggest realizations because we were trying to figure out how these things work. And there's an accountability if you own a piece of the business all up and everything about it. But then there's a responsibility to advise them, to be experts, to give them good advice, and to execute that lands on your specialty teams like the security team. And people get that wrong, and they think that, we can just blame the security team and put the CISO in jail. That's not going to fix the CEO's decisions.
This AI tour thing that we've had here at Microsoft, and we had like the second season coming up, talking to primarily a developer audience, and you're talking to a developer audience about security topics, or at least my team is. And they just blank stares because they don't generally believe, even developers that security is supposed to be part of what they do. They're just supposed to build. And then the security team, yeah, we may have tools to accomplish that, but that's the security team's job to take care of that.
But part of it is also that we have to do the education of these. I think we're at 71, 72 roles so far through our analysis. Like, you can't just expect the developers to magically know. You have to educate them on why they're supposed to do this thing called security, which they never knew was part of their job, what they're actually supposed to do. Here's your checklist. And 3, how to do it. If you fail on any of those, they're not going to do it. And yet our idea of security education is fish them and then punish them. Fish them and then punish them.
Yeah.
I'm like,
The stick.
no, you need
time.
72 different tailored plans to help the CFO understand in their language why it's important, to help the software dev directors, the business owners, the business architects, the business analysts. And we're not doing that. Like, I'll show you this other quote from this presentation. I was reading this book, and I didn't get that far into it because I hit a wall. Like, I love reading other things and bringing it to cyber, right? And they did analysis. The original version was in 94. So, right, this had nothing to do with cyber in the original point, right? And they were looking at nuclear failures, chemical plant explosions, ship sinking, the whole deal, right? And they basically found that human error is a wrong label, right? When someone says, oh, it was human error, no. The human was fixing the system all this time, and then they got exhausted, they had a conflict of interest, they got sick, whatever happened, and then they failed, then they blamed it on that human, right? That's what usually leads to human error as a label. And I was reading this quote, and I stopped dead in my tracks because I was like, the pattern occurs because in high consequence complex systems, yes, cyber, people recognize the existence of various hazards that threaten to produce accidents. No, not cyber. Nobody has a clue. We haven't even taken the time to explain that the guy walking by with a little nuclear symbol on the side and a remote could cause something bad to happen. We haven't even gotten to people to explain that to them. And yet we're seemingly surprised when something bad happens and nobody in the organization knows it. And I try to put a little hope on it yet, right? Like, I tell the kids, if you say I can't, well, you can't do it yet, right? Because we can fix this, but we have to recognize we have to solve that.
Right.
Is this just because we're just such a reactive species, it would seem these days, that we just can't get ahead of it? We can't be proactive enough. It's
how our brains are wired, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, when you think about it, like we have a disadvantage in cyber that the chemical industry, the fires, ship sinking, planes crashing, like they know when something could go wrong. They know a crash is a bad thing. They know a chemical spill is a bad thing. Like, there's a lot of things that they know is wrong, and they can see that danger and they sense it. Whereas in cyber, people don't take it seriously. It's just computers. It's just bytes on the thing. They just don't understand, and they don't have a visceral connection to it. So they don't have a natural way of saying fire bad, right? Like, we just don't have that in cyber. Like, it's a phishing email. Whatever. It looks like an email.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I agree.
More
It's probably a
physical.
lot of skilling, right? There's some skilling that needs to go on, or some training at least, and not necessarily putting the onus or the responsibility on the end users themselves. But if we don't train them, what do we expect to happen? If we don't give them a sense of what the outcome might be, then I think they just really
and that has
don't
to be
understand.
approved by the organization, right?
Yeah.
Like, because I can't, as a CISO, tell everybody that they have to come to this training and go through this thing. I need the support of the business leaders, of the CEO, to be able to push that down, to say it's part of their job, to make sure it's an accountability of the business owner that says, no maintenance window for you, no patching for you. Well, that should be on you, not on the people that we're trying to patch in that window, right? That has to be coming from the top. And that's the challenge that we face. Is security needs to know to make that advice, and then business needs to feel like it is their job and they care about it. Otherwise, I'll just fire the CISO and get another one.
Yeah. And it sounds like the old days of original IT pros, right?
Mm-hmm.
They would walk the hallways and someone would ask them for support, and they're like, I don't have time. I'm busy. I'm doing it. You almost need to send them to sensitivity training, right? So I think the security team is kind of just that same type of organization now that IT pros used to be. We need to send them to sensitivity training a little bit to say, hey, you need to be teachers versus,
Pirate Tomsky, I believe, shared just that sentiment. And I think that it's incumbent upon us to show up with the hard skills, of the classical technical skills and knowledge, expertise, but those soft or core skills as well, being relatable, being approachable, so that the message resonates with folks and they can internalize it and address risk on an individual level as well.
100% agree.
Well put. Or very well
Yeah,
put.
and I mean, when you think about this, when was the last time we had a new support function in almost every organization on the planet? It was probably IT in the 50s, 60s, 70s, maybe 80s, right? And before that, when did they add finance and HR? Probably hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, right? Like we are the first time we've had one of these things in our entire generation. Like, so we also have to give ourselves a little grace and like not get into this blame game and say, hey, we're not used to adding a new core function to your organization.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and also understanding that it's still kind of, trial by fire. We're still learning in that respect as well. Think about our discussion early on about your evolution in your role at Microsoft and how Microsoft has evolved and gotten more serious about security. I think the whole industry kind of needs to take that perspective as well. We're still all in this together, still trying to figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, we just got to give ourselves and our colleagues around us, all different professionals in different realms, forgiveness and grace. And hey, let me explain how this actually works. And that's the approach that we should be taking. And then, kind of expect that professional courtesy in return. But yeah, if you start out by saying these people are idiots, that's generally not going to work well.
Yeah, not the best thing to start with.
And you
Mark,
don't
you
even
said
have to
something-
say they're idiots. It's just
That's
the
just how I
approach or
flirt.
the
That's just my
attitude, I think.
flirtation.
Yeah.
That's okay, Ray. Hey, if it works,
Take all kinds,
Yeah, if it works.
Some people respond to that,
Yeah. Mark, earlier you said it's not a fire. Okay, it's an email. Maybe a company has financial loss, doesn't affect me. That really stuck with me because if you think about the last time we had a major physical effect on infrastructure due to cyber attacks, we're thinking about Ukraine, we're thinking about like Saudi Aramco. That hasn't hit North America yet. That hasn't hit main Western Europe yet. We could be months, weeks, days away from an effect that causes massive power outages or restrictions to water, et cetera.
Yep.
You think that's going to be a wake-up call?
It's tough to say. Because we had a taste of it with the whole CrowdStrike thing. I happened to be traveling that weekend, right? And a rental car place that I was at only rented 40 cars like a day, normally 40 or 50, and they were on like car 260 by the time they got to me. And so these guys were going through incredible feats to do stuff because there was no planes flying. People were keeping their cars. They were renting cars to get to their places instead. We had a taste of it, but has that actually changed people's behavior? Did that story carry for weeks and months on the news? No, it kind of got outshined by election and other things, right? And so, the problem is the human brain is wired in a very efficient way for where we evolved in, right? Which is we judge risk in arrears. If we have experienced something, we have a visceral emotional memory, we're going to go and do something about that, make sure that never happens again. If we haven't experienced it, it's a what if scenario with every other 10 million what if things we could imagine. And it's not something we prioritize because we don't have an emotional impact to connect with it, right? There's a difference between the people that have been through a major breach and gone through that and the sleepless nights and the misery of it. There's a big difference between how they look at cybersecurity versus the organizations that haven't, or the people, because they move jobs, that haven't. And so there's sort of this, I wish there was a way to shortcut it, but I haven't found one yet, kind of dynamic to that. You sometimes just have to experience it. It's like you can't explain the ocean to someone that's never seen it. It's that kind of challenge.
Well put.
So
Hopefully we don't have to deal with
AI
it.
if you want. Sorry, go ahead.
Let's get into some AI. Absolutely. Microsoft will probably fine us if we don't talk about
I
AI.
know
on the show this month.
Yeah, there's an AI tax or like an AI obligation.
Yeah.
So this is I think 6 or 8 slides that we put into the MCRA to explain the AI. And so, the first thing that was really struck me about the AI is that it's actually a long desired interface change for computers, right? So the first thing we had to do was speak computer, zeros and ones, punch cards, you name it. And it's gotten better over time with different types of language and assembly and object-oriented programming. And I forgot what they describe like Java and beyond as. It's a better language abstraction. But still, we have to talk to computers in their language, right? And then we added, and we realized we got tired of writing the same programs over and over again. So we came up with these command prompts, and then we would type a command in, and we would do that exact same thing. And it was like, okay, great. So that's a new, better way to do it. And we got tired of trying to teach people to memorize commands. And so we invented this GUI where they could click on the thing. You know, all sorts of Apple, Xerox, Microsoft stories abound. But generally, that's what the industry did. And then there's been this dream of, we want the computers to speak our language. We want native human natural language UI. Bill Gates was talking about this in the 90s, and plenty of other people, I'm sure, were talking about it before. You saw it in science fiction movies and the like. But like, it's been out of reach. And the reality is we're getting closer to it, right? It's not there. It's not perfect by any means. But for certain well-defined scenarios and certain scenarios that are like have a good amount of data that can, you know, tune the thing and train on it, we're actually at a point where that is becoming a reality, much more so than the I won't name the particular phone, but like, you know, essentially the command line version of voice command is what we've had as a chat, and it's not particularly great. If you know the command, great, you just have to memorize it and it will say the thing. But if you phrase it differently, it's like saying file not found in DOS, right? Like, I mean, that's pretty much how it acts. But we're actually getting closer now where it can start to understand intent and express stuff in human language. So that's kind of how I, you know, viewed this. And the thing that happens as these go by is it takes less skills to actually do something, and then it can do more things than the previous generation could. And again, we still always need the old stuff because we need to be able to program computers and do things. But that's kind of the first thing we noticed about AI. And then the interesting thing is, you know, pretty much the attackers are using it, and your business units are using it, whether you like it or want them to or not. And you just have to sort of first off accept that, and then educate your users that, hey, there's going to be really convincing phone calls. There's going to be, you know, really convincing phishing emails. That is happening as we speak. And so that's the first priority for a security team is, my gosh, please, please, please educate your people that this is happening. This is real. And then as they develop those systems and train it on the data, make sure they know, okay, if you train this thing on sensitive human data and then you make that thing available to the public, it's kind of like young Sheldon. If you ask it to tell you its secrets, it probably will. So you have to think about this and think about how you know, classify and structure that data, what you train it on, what you give it access to. And you need to make sure the people that are going forth and doing all these great AI apps understand that and are thinking through that so that they're not the reason for the next privacy, security, et cetera, ethics incident that your organization has to face. And then, you know, don't let the attackers just be the only ones that are, you know, picking up this cool new tool or weapon or whatever you want to call it. Make sure your folks are taking advantage of it and, you know, using it for the scenarios that it works really well at. It's not perfect for everything. It's not a silver bullet. But if you don't like writing up incident reports, it does a darn good job. You know, there's some things that it does a really good job. It can, you know, guide a new analyst through, hey, here's a basic investigation process. There's some things that, you know, Copilot for Security or Security Copilot, I forgot what we're calling it nowadays, does really well. And so make sure you're looking at that and saying, hey, would this help us in our SOC, or do our people not need it? Like, I mean, that's the way we're sort of thinking about that strategically.
Well, and I think that's important to highlight as well. I think a lot of times any organization or vendor rolls out some super cool, neat new application, and all of a sudden organizations feel like, oh, we have to roll this out or we have to use it everywhere. But you really just want to use the right tool for the job.
Yeah,
Yep.
Well said. And
Yeah.
Pirate Tomsky in the chat brings something up. He says, I've seen organizations disable Copilot because it overexposed data. And honestly, if you have the improper configuration or the maturity of your information protection and data security is not existent, then yes, it could show you the 5-year plan. It could show you the details of X, Y, and Z. So it's kind of a wake-up call, I would say, especially in the data protection game. Organizations got to kick it up a notch now if they want to use the toys.
Yeah, I think about, I have like two kind of semi-funny ways of explaining the whole data security thing. I'll go with the funnier one second. So the first one is like, do y'all remember Delve, like that Office 365 feature that came out?
when I got to Microsoft, I just punched into people's names. I'm like, oh, look at what my manager's working on and his manager. It was great. It was the coolest tool. Yeah.
And for folks that don't know, Delve basically goes through and what it did was it would catalog all the stuff, and whatever you had access to, it would organize and show it to you in a much easier way, kind of automatically. And so all of a sudden people realized that, oh, wow, people have a lot more permission to more things than I realized they did. And organizations essentially faced a fork in the road because Delve was turned on by default and then later disabled. I don't think we even use that term anymore. I think that would just got shuffled away and I'm violating the rule. But organizations either said, oh, we have a data classification security problem and went off and fixed that, or they said, oh, we turned off Delve, so we're good. And if they went down the second path, they're not in good shape when AI comes along because there's now a really good business reason to use that data, and the permissions are still just as bad as they were in the first place. The slightly more comical version of it was a lot of security people say, oh, data security, oh, it's all about the data. It's very important, but we're going to work on endpoint and identity right now. oh yeah. And we got this whole new cool thing. So no, we can't work on that. Oh yeah, we're migrating to cloud, so we can't do data security right now. And along comes AI and it's like, hey, whoa, he's got a knife.
Yeah. I love it. It's the meme in real life. You did it, Mark. I love it. That's incredible.
Mark, you nailed it. I work in data security all the time, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, I want to learn all about what you do. It's like, yeah, we've been here the whole time. Not sexy compliance, right? But we're here. Yeah. Well, ultimately, I try to explain to people when you show them like the Microsoft's version of the attack chain. It's like, what's the end goal here? It's data, right? All this cool stuff, identities and lateral movements and endpoints and blah, 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 blah. It's all about exfil, or it's all about holding someone ransom by encrypting their data. Ultimately, it's data. We're coming back to data now.
Yeah, I think it's actually two things. It's data and the availability, and I'm sure at some point we'll be worrying about the integrity of systems, right? Like I need to make sure that my online banking site is up, my e-commerce site is up, because I can lose money by the second, by the minute, by the hour for that. And it's the data, right? Like it's the two different things. So it's about what matters to your business and then mapping your technical assets to that. And no one else can answer that but the business leaders, but no one's ever asked them that question in that way. And so it's a good discussion that has to happen, but one that often hasn't.
Well, I would suggest maybe also still the code, right? So you've got your data, you've got your systems that need to be available, but there's still, if we go back to the source, it's those developers, it's that code.
Oh yeah, I mean, and you can take down that business service or that data or whatever in many, many different ways. And the code is a really tough one to deal with because how many people have an SBOM and a backup copy of it that the attackers can't see for comparison? Not a lot of organizations.
Right. Hey, we're at the top of the hour. Mark, I truly appreciate it. One of the things we generally like to ask. Oh, go ahead, Ray. Do you want to?
Yeah, no. You gave us a hook of that, and maybe in the future, not too distant future, we'll be concerned more about the integrity of the data. We need you back. You need to come back, and you need to do a deep dive and delve into that concern.
Pun intended.
Yeah, that would be great if you would, because we've kind of alluded to all along, this continues to evolve. We're all in this together. We're still learning things, even from the AI perspective. I know a good friend of ours been on the show, Richard Diver. Him and we talk to customers periodically about, what's new, what we've done in the past 6 months and things like that, different customers. And so this is always continuing to evolve. So Mark, would love to have you back. I do want to, though, because we do have Henrik here, and I'm going to put him on the spot. He has to at least ask one question because he chose to be a co-host on this episode. Mark, he explicitly selected this episode, Mark, to be here. So I hope he asks you one question.
Thank you. I don't like to butt in and stuff, so I politely always wait. Yeah. But Mark, congratulations on the 100th episode. It was a blast to hear.
Oh, thank you.
Really great. Love the podcast. And also, I choose Mark because when I met Sarah, she never stopped talking about Mark. it was just crazy.
All good things.
Yeah. But my question is actually, when we're looking at the AI for security, I guess we, as a customer of Microsoft, and I am in a developer house,
Mhm.
we have exactly the same problem that everybody in the org, all the developers, they tend to not focus on the security. Let's just be honest. And it's actually we also have teams working with Azure OpenAI and stuff like that. And I must admit that security is not high on their list also. And I guess it's the same problem, because when people are going to use AI applications and develop them in companies, we're going to see the same problem as we see with all the other codes. They don't focus on security. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. The question was, how should we actually, yeah. What's the solution, Mark?
So the solution is one that is often difficult to implement, especially as someone that works in the technical trenches. And you might have noticed that Microsoft has a Secure Future initiative, right? Effectively, what we have found that, despite the fact that we have an amazing amount of security resources and super talented people, that people almost can sometimes use it as a crutch, right? And they think, oh, we have such a big security team, I don't need to do security in my job. And so, the same problems of we don't even look at security in the first place, don't have a security team, or really underfund it, versus we have a big one. People still are using that to come to the same conclusion that if you're not paid on it, if you're not held accountable for it, and this is going from the Microsoft SFI to a general principle, if people don't feel accountable for it and they feel like it's someone's job and no one has told them it's their job, it's never been part of their job, they're not going to care. Why would they care, right? And that's why one of the things, and I really love the fact that Microsoft is essentially becoming a case study of this, is you have to have accountability for security. As I mentioned, that 72 different people, right, or those different roles rather, you have to make sure that they each know their job, that each of them are held accountable to their job. And that goes, through the business channels, through the development lead channels, the software development VPs and the directors and the managers, et cetera. They have to understand that they are accountable for security. Now, that also creates an accountability, or responsibility rather, for security to make security easy for them. Because if security made them go through, okay, every time you want to do your app release, we're going to make you read through a 72-page report. No. And it's mostly false positives. No. So security has to switch modes from making it as hard as possible and sort of a cover your assets sort of CYA type of mode. Sorry, that's one of my favorite lines. But we have to move them from that to, okay, we're not going to blame you, but we need you to make it easier for these people to take all the stuff in your brain and execute it. And so it's a two-part partnership, and both sides have to change the modality in which they engage, right? And if you've got great team managers that work together and reach across the aisle and talk to each other, great. If you can do that at the director level, great. If you can do that higher, great. Ultimately, you have to change the dialogue. And, security people can do quite a bit by changing the tone and how they approach it. But you still may have dev teams that say, no, I have no interest, and they have to be forced into doing it, right? So there's a lot of sort of it depends in there. The ideal case is that it's coming down from the top and the security team is being friendly, in which case magic happens. Sometimes you can get away with one or the other, but ideally, you've got to be moving towards both, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the most difficult things. I think even at Microsoft, sometimes we have that, depending on the org, sometimes is from a security perspective, even, if you want to learn about security or skill, put something formal on the schedule, but it still has to come from leadership to say, okay, this is part of your performance. There has to be a value. Otherwise, people will skip it or say, you know what, I'll watch the recording later or something, and they never will, right? It has to be something that provides value to both sides, right? So I don't know how we do that yet either, Mark.
We're learning a lot of lessons through SFI, and we'll be sharing those. So that's part of Microsoft's promise to the industry to again help lead.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate it, Mark. Thank you so much. Is there anything you want to leave our audience with? I know we're going to put your links in our show notes and stuff, so people will be able to access all the stuff we've talked about this evening. Also, is there anything else you want to say? Something you would leave them with? We talked a lot about the security stuff today. We talked about, kind of the model or the processes that a lot of organizations might potentially need to readjust to ensure that security is top priority. But is there anything else, any tips that you would give our audience about?
Just one last thought, which is just be good to each other. I mean, we all have a limited amount of time on this planet, and we're all struggling to figure out how to do the right thing. And, just be good to your neighbors, your colleagues, your coworkers, and friends.
That's perfect.
That is the way we should end every show.
Yes.
I appreciate that. I'm gonna
Every
take
day.
that, and that's gonna be our final. Probably can't do. They won't let me do it, but I appreciate it, Mark. That's awesome.
Thank you, Mark.
Well, I guess until next week, Edward will be back with us. Henrik will probably be in bed already. I think he stayed up late for this episode, so I appreciate that. But Mark, thank you so much for joining us this week. I hope you will be open to coming back when we need to learn something new.
Absolutely.
Integrity of the data. We're booking it. We got to get on the calendar. It's happening.
Love to talk about the playbook series.
Yeah.
That would be great. Yeah, we'll do that. Well, thank you, everyone.